Do you ever feel that emptiness? That strange feeling that you were born for something bigger, but something keeps holding you back? That is not paranoia. The system is working exactly as planned. In 1926, while the world was still recovering from World War I, a tiny book appeared from the shadows. It was only 28 pages long, and it made the powerful tremble. The author, known only as R.H.J., revealed something so groundbreaking that it had to be silenced right away. It is chilling when you realize the hidden wisdom in this work. While you drown in bills and worries, a small elite group uses this method to create the life they want. The most infuriating part, this knowledge does not require money. You do not need a degree. It has nothing to do with luck or privilege. It is yours by birthright. Why do you think you never heard about this book during your years in school? Why do major media outlets never mention this formula? The answer is obvious once you see who profits from keeping you in the dark. In this video, we are going to reveal one of the most censored ancient teachings, how a chosen few are quietly transforming their realities while everyone else remains stuck in the same trap. This knowledge changes everything. Once you understand this power, you will never be the same again. Are you ready for the truth, or would you rather keep sleeping?
Few people admit it, but there are those who claim that a small 1926 book makes certain elites more nervous than widely publicized political movements. The work, titled It Works by R.H.J., suggests that each person can shape their own reality through clear intentions and mental alignment. This idea goes against systems based on fear and scarcity, since it shows that human beings have a co-creative power that can dismantle schemes of control. It is not something rooted solely in religious dogma or academic theories. The content offers a practical and direct method in which consciousness plays an active role in bringing everyday events to fruition. Some see parallels with quantum physics, where the observer seems to affect a particle's state. Others connect it to Jean-Pierre Garnier Mallet's ideas about the unfolding of time, proposing that the mind can send and receive influences from future versions of itself. The fact that the book was written nearly a century ago and addresses principles that would later be discussed in the scientific realm surprises those who look deeper into the topic. There is a recurring explanation for why this concept makes certain powers uncomfortable. Those in positions of authority supposedly prefer to keep most people dependent on systems that feed off insecurity because that strengthens the need for leaders who offer protection or ready-made answers. When people realize they can consciously direct their thoughts, emotions, and actions, the reliance on hierarchical structures decreases. Discovering that many limiting beliefs are really just deeply ingrained, conventions encourages a search for autonomy and undermines the logic of domination. Ancient documents and traditions point to the mind's potential in creating human experience, though they use different terms in each culture. The specific value of this book lies in the simple way it provides instructions. Define precise objectives, write each one down, reread them periodically, and protect your goals from outside criticism. This sequence, which sounds trivial, hints that reality is not static, but is sensitive to inner conviction. People often debate whether this is just another variation of positive thinking. Yet some argue that the book includes distinct elements by emphasizing constant focus, ethical conduct, and a subtle conversation with principles of universal order. It is not just about chanting optimistic phrases. It highlights the importance of acting in line with what you want and maintaining a feeling of gratitude as though your goal has already been achieved. In this approach, the mind does not act in isolation. It interacts with a universe full of possibilities. The idea that such teachings are either downplayed or barely disseminated is usually tied to claims that some groups profit from collective inertia. The lack of initiative on the part of the majority makes it easier to push control policies and maintains narratives of incapacity. If it were widely known that each person can greatly influence their circumstances, there would be a shift in how reality is viewed, dismantling or at least challenging established structures. At the same time, there is a growing scientific interest in consciousness as a potential factor in certain phenomena. Terms like wave function collapse and quantum entanglement are becoming more significant because they show that the observer is not just a bystander. This development has drawn the attention of people who explore ancient traditions and see conceptual overlaps with modern discoveries. For some researchers, it all points in the same direction. The mind can shape reality, whatever words you use to describe the process. Real-life stories from people who claim to have used the book's method and seen results fuel the controversy. Skeptics call it a coincidence or a psychological suggestion, while supporters believe there is a real creative power at work. Even without a consensus, many acknowledge that this idea challenges the common view of reality and creates space to reconsider who benefits from the secrecy or the dismissal of these practices. The historical setting in which the book appeared goes beyond esoteric subjects. Published during a time of massive change, it raises political and philosophical questions by suggesting that individual autonomy can be revolutionary. Understanding your own mental power, so its advocates say, is a step toward dissolving models built on external authority, since security would no longer come only from institutions. Instead, it would spring from within, transforming power dynamics and relationships based on dependence. The bigger picture surrounding this discussion indicates that more than personal motivation is at stake. It is about rethinking the extent to which reality is fixed and unchangeable, or whether there is room for the consciousness to create alongside the world. At the same time, it raises the question, who benefits when the majority is unaware of this possibility? The book's subversive potential becomes clear as soon as we realize that a society of people who know about their own mental strength would not be so easily manipulated or kept in line by threats and talk of scarcity. The period around 1926, when It Works was published, was marked by a surge of intellectual curiosity, partly because of the aftermath of World War I. Many nations were still struggling to recover both economically and psychologically, which created an environment that encouraged people to look for new directions. Ideas about the connection between mind and reality were circulating in both academic circles and beyond, though not without controversy. Some researchers believed that emerging science contained mystical elements, while others viewed such notions with skepticism. In the early 20th century, discoveries were challenging many long-held standards. Einstein's theories of relativity and the early concepts of quantum physics, such as wave-particle duality and the uncertainty principle, began to reshape our view of the world. At the same time, ancient philosophical traditions, including several Eastern schools, already emphasized the role of consciousness, even though they used different terminology. Vedic scriptures, for instance, have discussed visualization and mantras for centuries, seeing them as ways of affecting the energy that permeates reality. It is possible that the author absorbed insights from these philosophical or spiritual streams, whether directly or indirectly. The book's core argument is that clear desire functions like a magnet, drawing circumstances that align with what you want. That ties in with various schools of thought that argue for a strong connection between mental focus and real-life outcomes. Some references are explicit: visualization, believing in the outcome, ethical behavior, and defending your goals from negative interference. Other references boil down to the notion that everything vibrates in sync with the quality of your intention. Different traditions, such as Tantric Buddhism, talk about focused meditation to influence the environment. In the West, As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, occult, mystical, and esoteric movements explored the so-called power of the mind, or creative power. R.H.J.'s book emerged in this cultural melting pot, bringing together principles that many found radical. After all, if a person can steer their life through thought alone, then structures that depend on obedience feel threatened. A message like that is bound to run into obstacles, especially at a time when governments and political ideologies are trying to shape uniform behavior. Reactions to these ideas were not uniform. Mainstream scientific inquiry of that era did not usually go near anything that seemed spiritual. It was uncommon to talk about consciousness as a factor in physical processes, let alone tie it to everyday practical matters. Few people had even heard of wave function collapse, nor could they imagine the potential for further exploration in that area. The book's reach remained limited, circulating among small groups. It never fully reached the general public in the way it might have if it had been more widely promoted. Even so, it fascinated some individuals who started experimenting on a small scale with these ideas, writing down their observations and results. Many accounts at the time highlighted the moral component of the method. The author made it clear that every intention should respect principles of harmony, because harming or manipulating others would lead to negative repercussions. That viewpoint may have been influenced by Eastern traditions, emphasizing compassion and ethical responsibility, or by Western esoteric circles that talked about the law of return. Even though there was no official scientific theory to back this up, there was a shared belief that negative intentions come back to haunt the originator, whether through spiritual mechanisms or through the interconnected nature of the universe. World War I had left deep wounds, and many people sought answers outside of established religions. Frustration with traditional explanations boosted interest in metaphysical topics and new possibilities. This opened the door to individuals who were more receptive to claims that our minds play an active role in shaping what we experience. Even without mass publicity, the concept spread across so-called alternative circles. Some authors dared to draw parallels between quantum phenomena and meditative practices, seeing intersections that, even if not definitive proof, at least got people thinking about how far consciousness might reach. Meanwhile, the 20th century surged ahead with technological revolutions and geopolitical conflicts. The spiritual side and the concept of co-creation ran counter to a purely mechanical view of the universe. As factories and industrial processes boomed, others turned their attention to more subtle forces to see if there was something beyond what mainstream science could explain. Still, a wide gap separated traditional researchers from students of esoteric fields. The discoveries about the role of the observer in quantum experiments had not advanced enough to be linked to making desires come true, and anyone who tried to connect those dots risked being dismissed as a crank. Historically, the seeds planted during that time grew slowly. Books like R.H.J.'s were shared quietly and on a small scale, influencing those interested in personal magnetism, the subconscious mind, and universal laws of cause and effect. Later on, similar ideas would appear in more popular works, sometimes without credit to their original sources. Yet, the 1926 text remained a key reference for people determined to unearth writings that integrated practical spirituality with what, in later decades, would gain a bit more recognition in certain scientific circles. It is also worth noting that the interwar years saw other thinkers studying how thoughts shape health, human behavior, and social dynamics. Some gravitated toward exploring the unconscious, like Carl Jung, who introduced the idea of the collective unconscious, suggesting a universal psychic connection. While Jung did not directly mention R.H.J.'s work, some people see parallels between his theories and the notion that the mind interacts with a bigger field in which individual and collective actions overlap. So, the message that we can create our desired reality was not entirely out of step with the more forward-thinking ideas of that period. Some argue that the challenge was not just conceptual, but also political and economic. Leaders and ruling groups rarely promote full-blown autonomy, preferring populations that see problems as inevitable. When most people discover they can shape their own circumstances, the power of coercion or persuasion held by the elites is reduced. Supporters of this view claim there was a systematic effort, in varying degrees, to discredit this kind of knowledge by labeling it superstition or pseudoscience. Although there is no solid documented proof of such censorship, conspiracy researchers keep the possibility alive that the status quo was protected by suppressing such ideas. The release of such a revolutionary book in the midst of historical and intellectual upheaval highlights that co-creation is not a recent concept. It found places that embraced it and places that resisted it, which shaped how it was passed along in subsequent years. Interest in these ideas resurfaced during phases of counterculture and spiritual searching, growing in popularity as some scientists proposed that physical reality might be more sensitive to consciousness than once believed. Even so, the original book remained relatively low-key, recognized mostly by people who went digging for it or stumbled across certain references. It is pretty common to see people linking the power of thought to visualization, but RHJ's techniques stand out by offering a structured approach to co-creation. Some see shades of quantum principles here. By setting very clear intentions, consciousness might collapse probability fields and nudge events toward a particular outcome. Although the book does not use scientific terminology, the parallels are hard to miss if you consider how modern physics is increasingly interested in the observer's effect on subatomic phenomena. The first key point is the precise formulation of goals. It is not enough to vaguely wish for something. The method stresses writing down your intentions in detail, setting plausible timelines, and holding on to the belief that your goal can be achieved. This belief comes from the idea that the mind acts as a channel, linking individual desire to a universal or collective field of latent possibilities. Phrases like, "A goal without clarity have nowhere to land," capture the idea that you need to specify a destination so the route can emerge, whether psychologically or energetically. The second step involves regularly and quietly rereading these goals. The book encourages repeated mental reinforcement of your desire throughout the day, yet warns you to keep it discreet to avoid skeptical comments. One reason given is that negative opinions can sow doubt and weaken the inner consistency of anyone trying to manifest something. If we draw a comparison to quantum phenomena, it is like needing to preserve a phase state without letting external measurements disturb the wave function of your desire. In simpler terms, sharing your plans too soon is like exposing a fragile sprout to harsh weather. Moral conduct is the third pillar. According to the guidelines, all intentions should honor ethical values because the universe will return not only the energy of thought, but also its quality. Gratitude and kindness are often described as high-frequency forces that strengthen the creation process. The reasoning comes from the idea that we are not truly separate from the collective. Each desire, even if personal, reverberates in the network that surrounds us. Self-serving or harmful goals would therefore boomerang back to the originator, a reasoning similar to karma or the law of return. These ideas naturally raise questions about how far the mind's influence goes in shaping events. Does simply wanting something with enough intensity guarantee it will happen without obstacles? The book clarifies that you cannot just sit around waiting for miracles. It advises taking steps that align with what you want, adopting an attitude of, I already belong to the reality I am aiming for. That shift in behavior signals to your own psyche, and possibly to subtler levels of existence, that the goal is on its way. Meanwhile, the daily practice of rereading your list is meant to keep your motivation high, even when challenges arise. The impact of theories like those of Jean-Pierre Garnier-Mallet becomes relevant when we talk about interacting with a future version of oneself. The idea is that by visualizing yourself in a scenario where your goal is already met, you establish contact with that timeline, receiving insights and opportunities. Though it might sound like science fiction, some people relate it to quantum interpretations about multiple or parallel realities. For many, this is exactly what makes the book so bold. Rather than submitting to a fixed destiny, each person would actively choose which future moves closer. On the other hand, critics say this is just another spin on positive thinking. Skeptics note the lack of objective proof and say that any manifestations are purely coincidental or driven by psychological predisposition. Supporters counter with a stream of accounts reporting unusual results and use quantum concepts to make the argument that reality reacts to the observer. Even with no unanimous verdict, the debate goes on. Another important piece is dealing with personal doubts. The book states that doubt works like a brake that lowers your desire's momentum and blocks its fulfillment. The instruction is to replace every hesitation with a reaffirmation of the goal, keeping your inner world consistent. This approach echoes a lot of practices across traditions in which the practitioner is told to keep watch over their thoughts and steer them back whenever negativity or distraction appears. The goal is not to deny reality, but to maintain a single-minded focus on what you intend to create. Some researchers describe this method as a form of mental alchemy because it blends focus, repetition, ethical behavior, and aligned action to transform things that once seemed impossible. It is not simply about attracting stuff, it is about changing the mindset of the person who wants something to develop maturity and responsibility. In that sense, it is not just about seeking personal gain, but following a path of self-discovery in which the mind learns how to create in harmony rather than clashing with the larger flow. In short, the main idea is that reality might be more flexible than most people think. Instead of being mere spectators, individuals can become co-creators, choosing which probabilities become part of their concrete experience. That possibility demands a certain level of unity between thoughts, emotions, and behavior, avoiding the scattered energy that comes from everyday stress. According to those who practice it, the hardest part is sticking to the discipline and tuning out external pressure or disbelief. But if you can pass that hurdle, there are numerous stories of big changes, from unexpected opportunities to improbable coincidences. Some believe It Works by RHJ is more than a personal development manual and touches on ideas that go beyond the individual. The discussions about inner potential, the emphasis on initially keeping goals private, the emphasis on overcoming doubt, and the moral dimension all point to a holistic approach where thought does not operate in isolation. These elements reflect a broader scope that merges spirituality, emerging science, reflections on freedom, and the search for deeper meaning in our actions. One recurring topic is the notion of an inner potential in each person, defined by some authors as the capacity to influence subtle layers of reality. In this perspective, consciousness is not just passively receiving outside stimuli, it actively projects ideas and emotions that shape the circumstances we encounter. Quantum physics research, which indicates that the observer can affect events, supports the argument that in less tangible domains, something similar might occur. In practical terms, this inner potential is activated when people clearly specify what they want. That specificity acts like a focus of energy, deciding which possibility among many becomes real. The link with quantum theories of multiple worlds is apparent because, under those theories, all futures exist, but observing one of them determines which path unfolds. If someone wants scientific backing, Jean-Pierre Garnier Mallet's work suggests that information can travel between present and future, making the fulfillment of a goal foreseeable if the mind is in tune with that outcome. The advice to keep a list of goals and reread them often, without broadcasting them to everyone, relates to the importance of protecting vibrational coherence. According to many traditions, thoughts, words, and feelings emit frequencies. Cynical or mocking remarks can interfere, shaking someone's initial confidence. By analogy, your intention is a wave that might weaken if disrupted from the outside. So, staying quiet is not about superstition. It is about guarding the delicate incubation period of your objective. This same logic explains why it is so important to fight off your own doubts. Most people grapple with inner voices of disbelief shaped by past experiences or cultural norms that reinforce rigid limits. Every time the thought, "this is not possible," pops up, the method says to replace it with a statement of trust. Much like how elite athletes use visualization techniques, this mental training rewires your perception and minimizes self-sabotage, making it easier to move forward with conviction. Morality also plays a big role here, which raises the question of how far these techniques can reach. The book does not just teach you how to achieve your own goals. It stresses that any wish you set in motion must be grounded in positive values, or you are bound to see a backlash. This part echoes the understanding that we are all woven together by some invisible network, somewhat analogous to quantum entanglement. Selfish desires, in that sense, disrupt the field and circle back negatively on the person who initiated them. Hence, there is an emphasis on aligning personal aims with good intentions to avoid harm to others. People who say they have had good results often report more than just checking off goals. They describe a sense of expanded awareness. In other words, it is not just about making cool things happen in your life. It is about realizing the world can be molded and is not as rigid as you once thought. That awakening can take on a spiritual or transcendent angle, as individuals feel part of a participatory universe rather than victims of random forces. John Wheeler's quantum theory introduced the concept of a participatory universe, where each observation shapes what we consider reality. On a practical note, the book does not promise instant miracles. Defining objectives and taking aligned actions requires ongoing effort, self-awareness, and ethics. A lot of people see this as different from simplistic messages like "think positive and everything will show up." Here, there is a spotlight on the harmony between what you want, what you feel, and what you do. It calls for attention to destructive impulses and a steady commitment to the worldview that underpins co-creation. Those who rise to the challenge often notice not only shifts in their environment, but changes in how they relate to their own emotions and beliefs. Social questions follow once more people see themselves as co-creators. If everyone realizes they have options, they are less likely to buy into narratives of fear or limited possibilities. Suddenly, structures that rely on rigid hierarchies find it tougher to push their agendas. Institutions that capitalize on insecurity see their influence wane. In varying degrees, that phenomenon can create friction for those in power, since the previously passive majority now starts exploring alternatives and challenging what they are told. Beyond that, there is the idea of applying these principles as a group. Reports of group meditations or collective visualizations describe situations where violence rates drop or certain issues improve. Though these experiences lack solid scientific endorsement, they keep alive the possibility that mental power combined among like-minded people, can produce visible outcomes. Some link these results to a form of collective resonance, where intentions amplify each other, creating a larger field of influence. From an academic standpoint, there is still controversy because most controlled experiments face challenges in isolating subjective variables. When it comes to consciousness, belief, and intention, intangible factors like emotional state, genuine effort, and personal inclination all come into play. Even so, the numerous consistent personal accounts, combined with some quantum ideas, keep many folks intrigued. And while there is no final explanation that checks all the boxes of conventional science, people continue testing these methods, adjusting how they practice them, and sharing their stories. A more open-minded approach suggests that everyone should give it a try, observing whether anything shifts tangibly after applying the method, whether it is dealing with a conflict, finding a new job, or improving a relationship. When what used to be coincidences started happening all the time, a lot of people came to believe there really is a link between the mind and reality. That is exactly where RHJ's work, first published almost 100 years ago, proves unexpectedly relevant in our modern world. It restores individual agency without forcing anyone to ditch their religious or philosophical roots completely, but it does call for integrity and focused effort. All of this leads some observers to call the material subversive. It does not incite any outward revolutions, but it triggers a shift in awareness that might shake the foundations of models built on submission. Once a critical mass of people recognizes that the usual restrictions can be revisited, manipulation becomes more challenging. This momentum grows even more when people, with or without any grasp of quantum physics, start using these techniques and witnessing remarkable changes in their own lives. The possibility that each individual can shape daily life raises questions about the broader practical and collective consequences of this viewpoint. The techniques spread by RHJ do not stop at personal ambitions. They also shed light on the relationship between personal freedom and systems of authority. If the mind truly interacts with reality's fabric, then everyday life is no longer just the sum of outside factors. It becomes a realm of intentional choices which can lead to unexpected outcomes. That perspective also brings a heightened sense of ethical duty. If consciousness really influences the flow of events, then every goal calls for some reflection on how it might affect everyone else. People who believe reality is shared see that even an apparently personal wish can have ripple effects on relatives, friends, or even strangers. This sense of interdependence goes beyond spirituality, connecting directly to how some choices affect other lives, which underlines the need for an expansive moral awareness. For elites that base their power on control, the biggest threat is losing their grip on populations that realize their co-creative strength. If mental focus plus high-minded values produce results that go beyond what we think is possible, then the usual story that we are all helpless starts to fall apart. That kind of paradigm shift is reminiscent of historic moments when revolutionary scientific theories toppled old models deemed absolute. A move toward a society where people understand they can shape reality from within could weaken any authority that depends on top-down obedience. The main sticking point remains verifiable proof. Critics argue that there are no replicable lab protocols that can validate this process of conscious creation. Supporters bring up countless reports of very specific synchronicities that are hard to dismiss as random chance. Whether you are for or against it, the sheer volume of first-hand testimonies drives people to experiment for themselves. Another common objection is that this practice might encourage a selfish chase for personal gains. The work, however, highlights the importance of ethics, tying each person's well-being to the good of the whole. When someone sets intentions that align with universal harmony, they usually face fewer obstacles because they are not creating needless opposition. In this sense, the approach moves beyond individual goals and into collective awareness, suggesting that a cooperative mindset can develop from people striving to co-create for the benefit of everyone. These teachings are not just theoretical. Many people talk about applying them to ordinary challenges, like solving practical problems. The outcome is a shift in day-to-day experience, with what used to be obstacles now rearranging themselves in favor of whoever has taken on this inner alignment. Even without a final scientific explanation, the phenomenon forces people to question beliefs about destiny, personal agency, and how events flow in life. Thinking about our ability to influence what happens around us leads to a re-examination of how societies stay in control. If human consciousness helps weave the fabric of reality, then the passivity that keeps populations in check starts looking suspect. For many, it works is a wake-up call to reconsider our ideas about power and self-determination. Once you stop seeing yourself as completely subject to change, fear-based systems begin to lose their hold. Contrary to what some might assume, this awakening does not require people to walk away from their own spiritual traditions. Anyone, regardless of religious or philosophical background, can apply these insights without giving up previous beliefs. The key is to reorganize your thinking and feeling, recognizing that the boundaries between the physical world and the mental dimension are more open than we once thought. This means that what seemed set in stone is open to the influence of a conscious observer. For those looking for more than theoretical musings, the method suggests real-life practices like meditation, visualization, or daily statements of specific intentions. Several testimonies mention an uptick in synchronicities once they start a routine that includes focused attention and emotional alignment. In this process, it becomes clear that individual goals tie into a sense of shared responsibility because each intention ripples outward. This awareness expands the idea of the common good, showing that personal achievement can fold into a larger context that benefits others as well. On the flip side, using reality-shaping abilities without ethics could create major distortions, reinforcing the notion that co-creation is not a tool for dominating or harming. The book advises acting with awareness, giving thanks in advance for outcomes, and staying alert to meaningful coincidences. Instead of waiting around for external answers, everyone can find ways to bring about what they need, as long as they respect the laws of harmony. So what would be possible, both personally and collectively, if a large number of people recognized this concept and applied it consciously? How would our social and economic systems change if they were based on mindful co-creation rather than exploitation fueled by scarcity? Evidence suggests that when a critical mass of people adopts a new paradigm, the system shifts whether we like it or not. We might be on the verge of that evolutionary leap, where enough people acknowledging their co-creative nature could trigger a global transformation. Recognize your role as a co-creator, and the only way to connect with this divine intelligence is through meditation. That is why we developed a set of audio tools to help you reach a higher state of consciousness. To learn more and get instant access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write, "It made sense to me,"